30 plants a week sounds like an awful lot, doesn't it? How on earth could anybody eat 30 entire big portions of vegetables a week? Well, obviously some people do. A lot of people do actually. But the thing is, that's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm not on about 30 different portions of vegetables. We're talking about 30 different types of plant across the week. And some of those can be really small. And once you know that fruit and nuts and seeds and beans and lentils and whole grains and herbs as well and spices, all of those count towards that total, that number 30 starts to look far more achievable than it first sounds. In our house, we probably eat, let's be honest, around 40 different plants in a week, and a lot of people will eat even more than that. Now, I know that we more than 30 because I actually sat down and counted ours a couple of weeks ago in preparation for this video because I was curious, do I get close to that number or not? And it turns out that this one very simple target might be the most useful single thing that you can aim for if you want a healthier gut, a stronger heart, a calmer immune system, and, off the back of all of that, a longer life. Now, I want to be clear about why your gut sits at the center of all of this. Your gut microbiome isn't just some isolated thing tucked away in your belly, doing its own separate little job. It is connected, literally, to almost every other system in your body, from your immune system function to your metabolism to your mood as well. And I say that because most of your serotonin is actually made in your gut. So if is in a poor state because you're living mostly on ultra-processed food, which most people in the UK and the US do, then the chances are your brain and your kidneys and your heart just aren't performing at their best either. Remember, a healthy gut is one of the foundations that everything else is built on, and that is why I keep coming back to it. If you're new to the channel, then hello, I'm Dr. Alex. I'm here to help you cut through the noise and help you to live longer and stay healthier along the way. And if you find this useful, then please do help me out, support what I'm doing here by liking the video, giving it a hype as well, and also subscribing to the channel. And I promise you, I will keep making these videos for you to help you prevent the diseases that we see all the time in the A&E. So today I'm going to explain exactly what happens inside you to hit this magic target of 30 plants a week, right down to the bacteria in your gut and the compounds that they produce, and why the variety matters far more than the sheer quantity that you eat. So the obvious question at the beginning of this video is, where does this magic number 30 actually come from? Well, obviously, it isn't a number that I just plucked out of thin air. It comes from one of the largest studies ever done on the human gut, which looked at the gut bacteria of literally thousands and thousands of people and asked one very simple question. What separates the people with the healthiest, most diverse gut microbiome from everybody else? Well, in this study, they tested all of the obvious candidates, and the answer wasn't whether people ate meat or were vegan, it wasn't whether they took probiotics, and it wasn't how much they exercised. The single strongest dietary predictor of a diverse, healthy gut was the number of different plants a person ate in a week. The people eating 30 or more different types had noticeably more diverse gut bacteria than the people eating 10 or fewer, which is the average person in the Western world. And the science of the microbiome has come on enormously in the last decade. And what strikes me about this finding is how very neatly it fits in with everything else that we understand. What we see in people's guts, the mechanisms we can watch in the lab, and the health outcomes that we track over years, all of this points the exact same way. And that is what makes 30 plants such a brilliant practical target to aim for. And remember, when I say plants, we don't just mean vegetables. Fruit counts as well, whole fruit, not blitzed to sort of, get rid of all the fiber, but so do nuts as well, and seeds, and beans, and lentils, whole grains, herbs, depending on where you come from, and spices. And this is where 30 stops looking like an absolute mountain to climb, because the chances are, if you cook a meal from scratch a few times a week, then you're probably getting very close to 30. A sprinkle of mixed herbs on your dinner is several plants. A tablespoon of mixed seeds on your porridge or your overnight oats, or on your scrambled eggs, which we do most days, that's a good amount more as well. A handful from a bag of mixed berries can be 5 in one go. But, as I've just sort of alluded to, there is something much more powerful going on here than just simply adding plants to your plate. when you reach for herbs and spices, the chances are you are cooking a meal from scratch with whole ingredients in the first place. So, when you reach for a handful of nuts or berries as a snack, the chances are you're no longer reaching for an ultra-processed snack instead. So, the more plants you bring in, the less room there is for the ultra-processed crap by default because your diet only has so much space in it. Think of it like a game where you score a point and you take a point off your opponent at the same time. You haven't just gone one ahead. That gap between you and your opponent has opened up by 2, if that makes sense. So every plant that you add does that same double job, adding something good while pushing something worse out of the way. Now, the next obvious question is, why would 30 different plants beat eating a big pile of the same 2 or 3 healthy ones? Well, the answer, a lot of it comes down to fiber. And this is the bit that almost none of us were ever taught about properly in school. We tend to talk about fiber as if it is a single thing, but there are dozens of different types of fiber, and different species of bacteria in your gut feed on those different types of fiber. Just picture for a second these trillions and trillions of bacteria in your large intestine, almost like a garden, an enormous living garden that does a huge amount of work on your behalf. If you only ever water just one corner of that garden, then only one patch of it will ever grow, and the rest of it will just wither away. So if you eat the same 5 foods on repeat, then you feed that same narrow handful of species. So your garden ends up pretty thin and just a bit one-sided. A few different types of plants thriving while everything else slowly fades away. If you eat 30 different plants across the week, each one carrying its own mix of fibers and plant compounds, then you water the entire garden and it grows into something really rich and varied and far more resilient as well. And when your bacteria ferment all of that fiber, they produce a family of compounds called short-chain fatty acids. And butyrate, as I talk about all the time, is the one that is so important to know about because it's the one preferred fuel for the cells lining your colon, your large intestine. But here's something about these compounds that gets far less attention. Short-chain fatty acids also signal to the cells in your gut wall to release your natural appetite hormones, including GLP-1, which some of you may have heard of. This is what we see in a lot of these weight loss jabs. So feeding your bacteria properly gives you a gentle, natural nudge on the same system that those drugs target, like Wegovy and Ozempic and Mounjaro as well, helping you to keep your appetite in check from the inside. This is why I say the more whole natural foods that you eat, the less you feel these cravings for anything sweet and sugary. This has been my experience anyway. These compounds also help to hold the gut barrier really tight. And this is worth slowing down on because you may have heard of the phrase leaky gut and assumed it was just a bit of nonsense that, influencers are talking about on Instagram and TikTok. The term itself is often oversold, but the underlying biology is real and it's measurable. So it's worth talking about this. The lining of your gut is literally held together by tight junctions between the cells, and when that barrier is weakened, larger fragments from the bacteria that we eat can cross into the bloodstream and trigger low-grade inflammation throughout the body. Most of our strongest evidence entire process so far comes from lab and animal studies with a growing picture in humans. But the mechanism is really well established, and butyrate is one of the things that helps to keep those junctions, tightly sealed. So when you feed your gut a wide range of plants, then the benefit reaches well beyond digestion, out to a barrier and a set of chemical signals that travel to your liver and your immune cells and even your brain as well. Now, I'm going to come back to that point I've already mentioned a couple of times because I really want to nail this home and make sure that you understand it. This is something that has come up in conversation in the comments a few times recently, which is why I'm focusing on it so much. What if, every healthy thing that you added to your plate also removed something harmful without you having to think about it? This is the conversation that I'm trying to get people to think about as they try and change what they eat over time. It's not just about, keeping all the ultra-processed food in, but just adding the healthy stuff in it. The idea is that it's replacing the ultra-processed stuff over time. Just say you've got a tabbouleh salad for your lunch, which we had yesterday. It's packed with parsley and mint leaves and bulgur wheat and tomato and lemon. Or you've got a bean salad, which we made a couple of weeks ago. So you finish it and you're full. Now, that of fullness is the entire point because it means you're not going to follow it with a Tesco meal deal like the BLT sandwich or a bag of crisps or the chocolate bar on the side. The plants have added fiber and nutrients to your diet, and they've also taken up the space. And the appetite as well, most importantly, that the ultra-processed food would have otherwise filled. And there's protein to think about as well, which is quite easy to miss when we talk about plants, because nuts and seeds and beans and lentils are really, really good sources of protein as well as fiber. So eating a wide range of plants tends to lift your protein intake without you buying a single tub of protein powder. Protein, remember, also keeps you full far longer than anything ultra-processed does. And I say this as somebody who has a terrible sweet tooth. Years ago, if I was hungry, I could get through, I would say, 3 chocolate bars before the hunger actually went away. That is hundreds and hundreds of calories. Whereas now, just a handful of pecans or walnuts or, something like a homemade flapjack packed with nuts and seeds, that settles my hunger after just a small portion. Okay, now for the really important question. How do you actually reach 30 plants in a week without turning every meal into a bit of a math problem or going vegan? None of this is about getting rid of meat or anything like that. We're just trying to change certain things to try and get these 30 into every single week. The trick that I rely on personally is to lean on mixtures of things, because a single mixture can hand you a very large number of plants in one go. In our house, we use have you seen the Zoe Daily 30? It's a yellow bag. Well, you'll all know Zoe, the YouTube channel, and Professor Tim Spector. Well, they got a product called Daily 30, which is a blend of around 30 different plants and nuts and seeds and herbs and grains, all of them sort of ground and milled together. Before we started using that, we used to use Linwood's ground flax seeds, but they also come with goji berries, and I think it's almonds and walnuts. Basically, lots of different things ground down that you can just add onto anything. It's the only thing that I use every single day that you might loosely call a supplement. Although, you'd argue that it's simply just whole food that has been ground up. So a spoonful goes onto my Greek yogurt and berries in the morning. It goes onto a salad or a stirred through soups that we make, or stews, or onto pasta or scrambled eggs. There's not a dish that I've come across yet where you couldn't add something like this to it. Yes, if you're not used to it, then it might take a bit of, getting used to. But, really, once you've had this for a few days, it adds a lot of texture and crunch and flavor to most meals. I wouldn't go without it these days. And it really does deliver a good chunk of the week's variety into a single serving. Now, beyond that, the strategies are simple and inexpensive. Frozen mixed berries and frozen mixed veg are picked when they're ripe and just frozen pretty soon after picking, and they are kept for months in the freezer. And they give you several plants in a single handful. They are not expensive. A jar of mixed seeds kept by the hob lets you scatter a pinch over almost anything you cook. A tin of mixed beans can go into a bolognese or a curry or a soup where it bulks the meal out, and it makes your meat go even further. And remember, herbs and spices count as well. So any recipe that requires a few of these different things, they all count as well. Now, to anybody watching this who suddenly wants to start piling fiber onto their plate when they're not used to it, there are some people who probably need to be a little bit careful before you do that, because your gut, it does need time to adjust. If you've been eating very little fiber and then you jump straight into 30 plants overnight, then you're likely to feel a bit bloated and a bit windy for a while as well, because the bacteria that handle all of that extra fiber, they need a few weeks to build up their numbers. So the obvious approach for anybody who can resonate with that is to just bring it in gradually over the course of, I would say, a month. That is plenty of time, adding a couple of new plants each week rather than 20 in a single day. And remember to drink plenty of water if you're adding all of this fiber to your diet. And if you do that, if you give your gut time to adjust, then you will find that you tolerate this pretty well. And, before long, this will just become part of your routine. And of course, as I say in most videos, all of this is only one part of a much larger picture. All of the fiber in the world will not undo broken sleep or a body that never moves or a diet that is still awash with liquid sugar and alcohol. It is the whole pattern held very steadily over years that does the real work. And plant diversity is just one small piece of everything I talk about on this channel. So why don't you give this a proper month and pay attention to how you feel? It is common to notice your digestion settling into something more comfortable, your energy steadying across the day, and your cravings for junk food beginning to fade. That was my personal experience a few years ago because a well-fed gut sends very different signals up to your brain than a starved, monotonous one does. Now, if any questions come up as you try this, then please do put them in the comment section below this video, because I read all of them and they shape the videos that I make next. And if you know somebody that could benefit from this video, then why don't you send it their way? Try and help them out. The easiest place to start for most people is just your very next meal, just adding one extra plant that you wouldn't otherwise have reached for, whether that's a vegetable or an extra herb or just a handful of nuts and seeds. So do that, build on it slowly, and the rest will follow naturally and much more easily than you'd expect. I hope you found this video useful. Please give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button if you did. I will see you in the next one.